you might be in a situation where you need to essentially blow up your budget. I'll call it that. Right? What I mean by that is you either have some type of debt, some type of situation that popped up, something that requires your financial attention. I accumulated some debts and I said, hold on a second, this isn't right. And based off of the interest rates for these debts, it doesn't make sense for me to stick to this exact budget that I have right now. I need to make a change. That's a strategy where you can pay down your debts, of course, get rewards, because I'm using my credit card for all my expenses, which gives me my rewards, and basically my paycheck goes into that card, and I use that for everything as I pay it down, right? You might do it with a line of credit. You might do it with your mortgage, right? Or a HELOC. Your brakes may go on you. You might hit a curb, God forbid, and you mess up your alignment in your car. You might get a crack on your windshield. These emergency situations pop up. What do you do financially in these situations where you need quick access to money if you didn't put anything aside? That's where something called an emergency fund comes in. An emergency fund. You put money aside regularly, and they say at least 3 to 6 months. The brakes go. You have the money set aside to replace the brakes, instead of having to build up debt, bad debt, right? Swipe the card, not have money to pay it off, and then try to pay it off over time and, pay interest on it. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Success Spectrum podcast, where we dive deep into the world of finance, entrepreneurship, and personal development. I'm your host, Kadeem McLean, and I'll be sharing stories and insights to help you become the next best version of you. Now, today's episode, we're talking about the first step to financial freedom. But before we really dive into it, I want to backtrack and talk about last week's episode. We talked about mindset, and arguably, my belief is mindset ties into just about everything in life. Right? To say beauty's in the eye of the beholder, it's kind of synonymous, perspective, but we're talking about mindset. We talked about growth and fixed mindset. If you haven't heard last week's episode, I encourage you to go back and give it a listen, because what we're going to talk about today is irrelevant and it's not going to help you unless you go back and listen to that first episode. And if you don't know what a growth or fixed mindset is, definitely go back and give it a listen. But I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this term before. The reason I say to go back and listen is because with a fixed mindset, there's a little bit of arrogance that comes along with it. So you might think you're above a budget, which is one of the topics we're going to talk about today. If you have a fixed mindset, you believe you're above a budget and you don't need to do one. Maybe you've done one in the past and you see it as elementary. Let me give you an update though. Google, Amazon, HP, AMD, Walmart, Costco, these big companies, they do quarterly, annually financial assessments. Some of them on a different schedule or time frame. But if these big companies are doing financial reviews or budgets, what makes us think that we're exempt from doing a budget? They do it for a reason, many reasons. But if they're doing it, and they say copy the habits of the successful, and then why are we not doing it? And again, all of this that I'm saying right now, if you have a fixed mindset, is irrelevant and you're just looking at me like this dude doesn't know what he's talking about. Go back and listen to the first episode or shut this off. But I encourage you to keep listening so that we can work on that for you, right? On a growth mindset, you're willing to try and look at things, right? You're going to listen to different opinions and realize and understand that everybody has something to teach you in some area. Everybody can teach you something. So when it comes to a budget, you haven't heard it from me before. I might say it a little bit differently than you've heard it before. And instead of just looking at your budget every year, maybe you're going to look at it more frequently, every 2 weeks or every month or every quarter, whatever frequency you decide. But you need to spend time with your money, and looking at your budget and regularly updating it is one of the ways to do that. So when we talk about budgeting, the first step to financial freedom, we need to, let me share a personal story with you. When I want to say 21, 22, maybe I think it was the month before I turned 22. Long story short, I sat down with somebody who shared some financial information with me, and one of the things we did was a budget. And I realized I had $500 a month that I could put towards investments. So what I started to do was save that $500 a month. And About a year, maybe or so, maybe a little bit less, a year later, I realized I had $6,000, just over 6,000 in my account. Now, as a 22-year-old, that was the most money I've ever had my hands on, right? 6,000. So I looked at it and I said, wait a second. I was able to get $6,000 by deciding to save $500 a month and sticking to the plan and putting it into an investment that gave me gains and growth. I got $6,000 out of that, the most I've had in my hands at that time. So I said, wait a second. And it's grew since then, but this thing works wonders. I've had countless clients come to me and say, wait a second, Kadeem, how is my bank account, or not my bank account, but how's my investment looking like this? And I say, well, because you stuck to the principles. You had a goal. We reverse engineered that goal. We looked at how much we need to save now. We looked at your budget, right? And then we figured out how much we're going to save. We stuck to that plan, whether it was $50, $100, $200, $500, $1,000, whatever the case is. There was a number and we stuck to it. Came up with a plan. We stuck to the plan. Of course, we're going to get to the end goal. And they say, I saved this much just from doing that? Like I have all of this now? Yes, because you stuck to the plan. So having a plan is one thing, but sticking to it is where the real reward comes from, right? There's just having a plan is one thing, which is great, but you got to stick to a plan to be able to get the rewards that plan will bring. I know personally, of course, in many different situations and helping clients and seeing it happen with them, that budgets, while they may seem elementary, they're vital and they're really the first step. Because I always think about it this way. And maybe I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, but a map, right? You look at a map, there's 2 points on a map. One is where you want to go. Yes, knowing your destination, knowing your goal, the end, let's say, where you want to be is vital and important. Absolutely. But just as important, arguably, is where you are. When you go into a mall, I don't really go into malls too often, so I don't know if they still do this, but I think they do, right? You look at that information board, and on that information board, they have the different store locations. Let's say it's a 2-story mall. First floor is these stores, second floor is these stores. And whichever floor you're on, you can look at it and say, okay, so these stores are here, and then first floor, these stores are over here. Great. You know where the stores are. But when you look at that map in the mall, there's another point. And it says, you are here. It might be a little red dot or orange dot or whatever color it is. It says, you are here. If you don't know where you are, that dot, how are you going to find your destination? How are you going to know which route to take to get to this destination? You won't. You will not. And you're going to be lost. You're going to wander around trying all these different things, taking the most dangerous routes to get to a destination. You don't even know where it is. You might be going in the opposite direction. So knowing these 2 points is vital and important. Where you want to go and where you currently are. Because it'll help you to, again, plan out the best route, avoid the swamps, let's say, or the dangerous, the dangerous routes with the lions and tigers and bears. You want to avoid those. Let's take the path of least resistance in this case, because you know your 2 points. Without knowing those 2 points, it's going to be a rough road. It's definitely going to be a rough road. So what is a budget? Simply put, a budget takes a look at your income, all of your income sources, and then takes a look at all of your expenses. And then it gives you something called your discretionary income. And that discretionary income is how much you have left over after you received your income and you've paid all your bills. Having that number now, you know essentially how much you're spending on nothing. Because most of the time, if we're not tracking it, we don't see that amount. Again, a lot of my clients, I'll do a budget for them regularly, and that discretionary income, when they look at it, they say, that's not right. And I say, wait a second. You told me all of your expenses, right? Yes, I did. You told me your income, right? Yes, I did. Then this is accurate. The question now becomes, what do you do with it? Because if you're not noticing it, you don't think you have that amount, clearly you're doing something with it that you're not aware of because you didn't even know that you had that much. So again, what is a budget? Go back, again, simply, 1 or 2 months, let's say, in a simple way, 1 or 2 months, look at all your income for that month, jot it down. And typically when I do that, I would say take the lower amount. Look at all of your expenses for the last month or two, jot that down. And I would again say, if you're doing 2 months or more, take the higher amount. You can break them up into categories, right? Food and groceries, car expenses, whether that's a lease, finance, gas, maintenance, whatever the case may be, or if we don't drive, transportation. What do you spend on internet? What do you spend on your phone bill? What do you spend for Netflix and Disney Plus, for snacks, right? Dining out, entertainment. So again, there's many different ways to do a budget. In its simplest form, it's income minus expenses, and that gives you your discretionary income. One of the ways that I like to do a budget, it takes into account something called your net worth. And this is something that's vital to your financial journey. And I'll explain why in a moment. But what your net worth is, all of your liabilities, right? All the debts you have, your credit card, your line of credit, your outstanding mortgage balance, your car payments, and so on, right? There's the whole list of them. If student loans, whatever it might be for you, you take all of that, right? And you also take all of your assets. So liabilities are something that takes money out of your pocket, to put it simply. Assets put money into your pocket. So for example, you have the liability of the outstanding mortgage, but then you also have on the asset category, your equity, right? What's the value you would get if you were to sell this property? So then, of course, you take all of your assets, once you've added them up, you subtract your liabilities, and that'll give you your net worth. A lot of you might be in the negative. Just putting that out there. And if you're not, great. If you are, it's okay. Because now you know, and you can work your way out of it, right? And hopefully, again, along this journey, I can help you to do that. But there's different strategies you can apply, different things you can do, of course, to be able to get yourself out of the gutter, let's say. Now, that number there, the net worth, let me give you another news flash here. A lot of us think that we'll become millionaires by our income. So we focus on earning more. But they've said many times, it's not about what you make, it's about what you keep. It's not about what comes in, it's about what you keep in. Because if you're making $1 million, but you're spending $1 million, guess what? You're flat. You're at zero. So making $1 million didn't help you because you're spending the same $1 million. Now, what you want to do is focus on, again, keeping it in-house. How do you do that? Assets, investments, avoid the liabilities and something called good debt and bad debt. You want to get good debt, but that's a conversation for another time. Your net worth. That is what determines whether you are a millionaire or not your income. Your net worth. That's the main piece. Your income is important. I'm not saying it's not, but some of you might look at your income and say, I'm only making $50,000 to $80,000 a year. How in the world can I become a millionaire? We can get there. We can get there. Because again, you don't have to make $1 million in a year to be a millionaire. It's the net worth that matters. Build up investments over time. Compound interest will be in your favor. Slowly put your money where you need to so that you can then keep leveling up in your net worth. This is the number that matters. Net worth. And when I do a budget, and I have a budget sheet down below in the description, you can go ahead and download that. But with that budget sheet, and there's many others you can find online, you can actually track your net worth as well. And that's the way I do it, right? And I have things broken up into different categories. You got expenses, you got debt, you got savings, and of course, like I said, assets, liabilities. So however you want to do it, if it's your first time doing a budget, keep it very simple is what I'd say. Keep it simple and go with income, go with expenses, and then that'll give you your discretionary income. And now you have a picture of where you are financially, and that you can do something with. Because now you have an idea where you are on that financial map. You have you are here, your starting point. And then of course, we need to think about the goals, the destinations, where we want to go. Because once you know where you are, now we can plan the route to get us to where we want to be. All right. So in a nutshell, that is a budget. And some of the things that this will help you to do as well, benefits of a budget, let's say, it helps you to not overspend as long as you stick to it. It helps you to stay on track for your financial goals. Say you wanted to buy a house in 5 years, and let's just say you needed $50,000 down payment for your house in the next 5 years. Now, I know where I'm at in Canada right now, it's not really going to get you anything much, but 50,000 in the next 5 years, right? Just for the sake of numbers. Once you know that number, now you can actually not backtrack. You can reverse engineer. That's the phrase I was looking for. You can reverse engineer because you know you need 50,000. So if you divide that by 12, that's how much you need to save in a year. You divide that by, you take the 50, you divide it by 5 rather. That's how much you need to save in a year. You divide that by 12. That's how much you need to save in a month. Let's just say at a 6% average return rate, you need about $750 a month to get to that $50,000 goal over the next 5 years. But again, we don't know that unless we, 1, have goals, know what we want to do and achieve, and 2, know where we currently are. Because if you don't know if you can save that $750 a month or not, what are you going to do? Right? You have no idea where you are. You're probably going to put away $100 this month, $200 that month, maybe $150 the next month, and you're going to sporadically save. And ultimately, likely miss your mark because you have no idea where you are. And if you don't have goals, you have no idea where you're going. So again, I'm not trying to shame anybody for not having goals or knowing where they are right now. But this is a plea from me to you to figure it out. Right? Figure out where you are, figure out where you want to go financially. And a budget is something that will help you get there. Right? Another thing a budget will help us do is realize what we're doing, realize how we're handling our financial situation, whether it's good, or rather, I don't want to say good or bad, but whether we're on the right track or not. And good news is if we're not on the right track right now, we can divert, we can change routes. So what I'm referring to is, I believe it was Warren Buffett, right? He said this: don't save what is left after spending, spend what's left after savings. Right? Spend what is left after saving. Because a lot of us right now, we are saving what's left after spending, if anything at all. And that's why we think we have no money to save. I don't have anything to save. How am I supposed to save? How am I supposed to invest? Whatever. We think we don't have it because we're spending everything. Here's what happens to our paycheck, right? We get our paycheck, and guess what they already did? They taxed us. Nothing we can do about that. Whether you think that's a good thing, bad thing, nothing we can do about that. Taxes. The next thing most of us do with our paycheck is pay bills. After that, we then spend on our lifestyle, our Netflix subscription, our Disney subscription, our night out at the club, or our night out at a restaurant, right? Buying ourselves a new shoes, new phone, new bag, whatever it may be for you. And I'm not saying don't do that. But what I'm saying is, at which point do you pay yourself? Because we got to pay ourselves first. If we want to follow the Warren Buffett principle, pay yourself first. And for anybody who doesn't know Warren Buffett, just look him up. Now, typically the best or better route, let's say, I don't want to say best, but the better route to go is make sure your bills are taken care of. Absolutely. No questions asked. You want a roof over your head. You need a roof over your head. You need food in your stomach, children's stomach, so on. But take that paycheck after it's been taxed, you receive it, put some money aside for yourself. That's the next step. Put something aside for yourself. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go, but put something aside, because if you don't, then you will continue to say, I have nothing left to save, or I cannot save. You will work for X amount of years and then say, I have nothing to show for it. And sadly, we've seen a lot of people like that. You know people like that. You may be one of them. And it's a sad situation. But guess what? Putting away whatever little bit you can now over time consistently. Again, that's a key. Consistency. will help us to get to a situation where we look back and we say, I'm so happy that I started to put this aside at this point. Because the opposite of that, again, it's a sad story. I've worked 20, 30, 40, 50 years and I have nothing to show for it. It's a sad story. So again, don't save what's left after spending, spend what is left after saving. And some of you may be budgeting, but there's some common mistakes that we may be making with our budgeting. One of them, like I said, is, again, at which point are you paying yourself? Are you taking care of the bills and lifestyle and then trying to pay yourself? How's that been working? If it's working great for you, wonderful. But it doesn't work for the majority of people. Because again, even if you are doing that, you likely did something good, which is keep your lifestyle to a certain amount when your income increased. There's something called lifestyle inflation. And this is a bit of a tangent, but as our income increases, what the majority of us do is we also increase our lifestyle to match that increase in pay. That is going to lead you living paycheck to paycheck. It's going to lead you to living paycheck to paycheck, or keep you living paycheck to paycheck. Instead, what you want to do is increase. Let's say you get $100 increase, for the sake of numbers, $100 increase on your paycheck. What you then might feel the need to do or desire to do, or even let's just say $1,000 increase in your paycheck. What would be a good rule of thumb, let's say, is take 20% for yourself, right? And maybe pay 10% or put 10% aside for investments. You can add 20% to your lifestyle. And then the other 70%, I think we're at, can go, of course, towards whatever it needs to go towards. Because again, if you increase your lifestyle while you increase your pay 100%, you're going to stay in the same situation. You're not making things better. You're making things worse, in fact. But what I was getting at is some of you will actually not increase your lifestyle, which is great, but then you're also not really investing, right? You look at your budget and you're spending on your lifestyle, but then you're also putting away a little bit after you spent on lifestyle first. So you might only be putting 10%, let's say, towards investments of that increase, when maybe you should be putting a little bit more, because you've increased your lifestyle and you are investing more, which is great. But what's the percentage? What's the ratio? Is all I'm trying to get you to think of with this. What's the ratio for you? Again, there's many different things you can follow, many different rules out there. 80-20, right? There's I think it's the 5-3-2-1 rule. There's so many different rules. Which one do you want to follow? Pick one and stick to it. Because people that become successful in each one of these, it's just a matter of which one works for you and which one you actually stick to and follow. So again, common mistakes, saving after spending. That's a common mistake. Missing, which ultimately, again, leads you to missing the mark. Because you had a goal to save this amount by this time for this date. This was the plan, but you didn't get to it because we're spending before saving. And again, caveat again, always make sure your bills are paid. I'm not saying not to. Pay the minimum on all your outstanding debts. Definitely take care of that situation. But this is a frame of mind thing. Change your frame of mind to saving before spending. Okay? Now, another thing is not tracking your small expenses. That's another common mistake. With this one, some of us drink coffee. Some of us go out and buy chips and candy. Some of us buy chocolate bars. Some of us spend money on the road regularly every day, buying lunch or dinner, breakfast even. And ultimately, tell me if you agree with me. Right? I know you're not going to give me feedback right now, but you can easily spend $20 a day on the road, easily, on miscellaneous items, let's call it. But I'm not even going to take the full 20. Let's just say $7 a day. If you were to save an extra $7 a day, and if you're not saving now, if you were to save $7 a day, and you can save $210 a month, in a 30-day month, let's say. $210 a month just from $7 a day. And how can you save if you're buying these miscellaneous things? Well, I'm not necessarily going to say cut back, but prepare things at home. You can do that. Buy, instant coffee mix instead of going to Tim Hortons or Starbucks. Starbucks is up there. So if you're going to Starbucks, that's a whole other story. But if you're going to Tim Hortons, right? Or Starbucks, wherever you get your coffee from, wherever you get your treats from, your chocolate, your candy, your gum, then buy those things in bulk, take them from home instead of going to the, let's say, gas station where things are priced more than they would be if you were to buy it in bulk from the grocery store. Again, instead of buying coffee on the road, get a travel mug and make your coffee at home. And these things are getting up there thanks to inflation. So if you're doing that, you can easily save $7 a day, which again is $210 a month. For some of us, that would make a huge difference. Others, maybe not so much. But then if that's the case for you, where doesn't make a big difference for you, challenge yourself to save more. And when I say save, you can take it as savings or you can take it as investments, which we'll talk about that in a minute here. So those are some of the common mistakes. Again, missing the mark because of not sticking to the plan, right? Either saving after spending, and the last one would be not tracking those small expenses, because every little bit adds up. So $210 a month today equals how much in a year? How much in 2 years? What's the growth on your investment in there? Because you leave it in there and it's compounding interest and it's growing for you. So those are some of the mistakes. Now, some benefits is, again, it helps you to avoid overspending, helps you to stay on track for your goals. So that $50,000 down payment you need in 5 years, you will have it because you stuck to the plan. There's no doubt about it. And eventually, this is a big one, it helps you to alleviate the financial insecurity that comes along with not being in the right position financially, and the right position in terms of where you think you should be, right? If you have a bunch of debts and you don't have any savings, that brings a sense of financial insecurity. But when you have savings, even if you have a certain amount of debt, you have a certain level of financial security. And I'm telling you, it's like let's say the monkey's off your back, the dark cloud moved from over your head. You can see the clear sky, right? So again, those are some of the benefits of putting a budget in place. It helps you to alleviate, this is the biggest one, that financial insecurity, right? Now, how do you create a budget? Well, we talked a little bit about that already. So you put the last 1 or 2 months, right? You look at your expenses. How much do you spend on, if you want to be detailed, how much did you spend on coffee? At which location, Tim Hortons or Starbucks, whichever the case is. How much did you spend on miscellaneous items like chocolate bars, chips, candy, gum? I don't know what you get when you're on the road, but how much you spend on those things? Again, your finance for the vehicle, your lease if it's leased, your car insurance, your gas, your maintenance, again, your different subscriptions that you have, your phone bill, all these other things. There's so many things to list in there. Everything that you see in your account when you look at your statements from your bank the last 1 or 2 months, everything needs to be added and calculated. So if it's an expense, something that came out of your pocket, a withdrawal, mark that down. If it's income, mark that down. Add up all your income, subtract your, of course, let's call it expenses, right? Subtract your expenses. That is one way to do a very simple budget that gives you discretionary income, which again, how much money do I have left over? Because if you don't see that number in your bank account at the end of every month, then you're missing something. You're missing something. And that's the great thing about a budget. It helps you to see what you're missing. If you have a boat, I mentioned this earlier, I didn't really delve into it, but if you have a boat and your boat has holes in it that you don't know of, your boat will eventually sink. Why? Because water is getting in and you don't know where it's coming from. You have holes in your boat. A lot of us have holes in our pocket. Money comes in and it's going through the holes in our pockets. We don't even realize it because we don't know how much is coming in. We don't know how much is going out or where it's going. You look on the stats of debt right now in this country, Canada, even in the States too, it's quite up there. It's too much. Last time I checked it, it was for every dollar that comes in, $1.70 goes out. So for every dollar in income you make, you spend $1.70. How are you going to live like that? You're digging a hole for yourself. Right? So again, these are just things to take into consideration, of course. So when it comes to your net worth, like I said, you can hit that link below to download that tracker, not just for your net worth, but again, it's a budget sheet that includes your net worth. If you, again, there's many online you can find something and use it, because if you don't, you're going to keep living in that same cycle you're in. You need to do a budget. You need to track what's going on, because this is really, again, the first step. And this isn't a one and done. It's a regular thing. So again, set up time. Every 2 weeks, are you going to review your budget? Every month, are you going to review it? Every quarter? Nothing more than that. I think every 6 months is too long, in my opinion. Every quarter, at the very least, review your budget. See where you're at compared to where you were, because then you can give yourself a pat on the back if need be, or you can say, you know what, no, I need to make these adjustments. And that'll let you know, again, am I on track for my goals, or am I missing my mark right now? And, again, course correct. Some tips. Actually, before that, take this into consideration. Take your goals into consideration when you're doing your budget. Because again, with that house situation, if you don't know you need $50,000, how are you going to know how much to invest or save? You won't. So your goals definitely need to be factored into your budget. Now, a controversial tip, you might be in a situation, and I was in one recently, where you need to essentially blow up your budget. I'll call it that. Right? You need to blow up your budget. And what I mean by that is you either have some type of debt, some type of situation that popped up, something that requires your financial attention. And if you follow that thing and give it the attention, it takes away from you doing your regular budget. It's okay. Depending, but it's okay. Because there's different strategies you can apply even in those situations, depending on what the situation is. Now, for me, my situation was a debt situation where I accumulated some debts and I said, hold on a second, this isn't right. And based off of the interest rates for these debts, it doesn't make sense for me to stick to this exact budget that I have right now. I need to make a change. The budget is a guideline. It's not an end all be all, if you will. It's something that we should stick to as much as possible. But in times like this, we might need to deviate. So for me, what I did was something called velocity banking, or a variant of it, some people might say. And I'm not going to dive necessarily into what velocity banking is, but it's something where it's a strategy where you can pay down your debts, of course, get rewards, because I'm using my credit card for all my expenses, which gives me my rewards, and my paycheck goes into that card. And I use that for everything as I pay it down, right? You might do it with a line of credit. You might do it with your mortgage, right? Or a HELOC, right? So this is something where it allows you to pay down your debts quicker in my situation, but also accumulate a bunch of rewards. And it's a win-win, because I'm paying down my debts, but I'm also getting rewards for using the card for all of my expenses, right? And this is something where you don't necessarily have to be in a situation of debt to be able to utilize this, but it was perfect in my situation because it helped me. So again, my point to this is there are different strategies that you can apply in different situations where you need to blow up your budget. But the goal is to get back on track. You might need to deviate for 6 months, however long it might take you, but stick to that plan for your deviation and then get back on track. Right? Because the goal is not to stay off track, it's to get back on track. Now, I talked about savings, and we'll be wrapping this up shortly here. Savings. Why is it important? You might get into situations where, better yet, a lot of us, I had a phone called the Nexus 5, right? It's a Google phone from back in the day. And I must have had 3 of them. And I know all of you, especially you with iPhones, no shade, no shame, maybe slightly, but a lot of you with iPhones especially might be able to, and Samsungs really, might be able to agree with me or understand where I'm coming from with this. I had 3 of them, 3 Nexus 5s. And I believe it may have been the same issue on all of them, may not have been. It wasn't, but 2 of them, the screen cracked. And when the screen cracked, I was able to replace them because somebody else had an Nexus 5 that wasn't working, and I just, took the parts from that one and put it into mine, kind of made a Voltron, and it worked, right? Combined the pieces that worked. Did the same thing with the 3rd one, but here's the thing. If I had the money put aside at that time, I would have been able to just say, forget the hassle of this and go get myself a new phone. Didn't have to be the top of the line phone, but go get myself a new phone. Why? Because it wasn't necessarily an emergency at the time, but your brakes may go on you. You might hit a curb, God forbid, and you mess up your alignment in your car. You might get a crack on your windshield, whatever the case is. These emergency situations pop up. What do you do financially in these situations where you need quick access to money if you didn't put anything aside? That's where something called an emergency fund comes in. An emergency fund. You put money aside regularly, and they say at least 3 to 6 months, that you now can cover an emergency if it comes up. If I had the money set aside, I wouldn't have to go get try to make a Voltron of these Nexus 5s and try to hunt down one that wasn't working. If the brakes go, you have the money set aside to replace the brakes instead of having to build up debt, bad debt, right? Swipe the card, not have money to pay it off, and then try to pay it off over time and, pay interest on it. Instead of having to do that, you had the money set aside for your emergency fund, so you're fine. That's why one example of why saving is so important. A quick strategy on that, you can automate it. Automate it till it reaches a certain amount, 5,000, 6,000, whatever it may be for you, 12,000. And every paycheck out of this account, there's X amount that goes into this account, which is my emergency fund. So saving is important. I think that saving and investment, again, are 2 different things. Now, investments, there are different ways to invest, so many different classifications, where we got stocks, we got bonds, we got mutual funds, we got segregated funds, you got ETFs. There's so many different ways to invest. We got full-on portfolios, and I'm not necessarily going to break all of that down today because the time wouldn't allow it, but we have risk versus reward. So the reward you want, some of us might say, oh yeah, I want 20% return a year. Okay, great, but what's the risk that goes along with it? There's risk associated with it. So for 10,000 or rather 10% per year, there's an equivalent level of risk that goes along with it. So for $20,000 or 20% a year return, there's an equivalent risk that goes along with that. I'm not saying you might lose 20%, but there's a risk that is associated with it. So the risk versus reward, when it comes to investments, don't just, I'm going all in. What's your risk level? What's your risk portfolio, or rather your risk profile? Because again, if you don't know your risk profile, you might be taking on more risk than you like or less than you like. Therefore, you're not getting the returns that you would like to get. So you need to know your risk profile. Now, how to start? $7 a day. That's one way to start, like we talked about. $7 a day. Where can I cut expenses? Where can I cut my miscellaneous spending so I can actually invest? Because I have nothing for investments right now. I'd like to invest. I'd like to build up a nest egg or a just-in-case fund, or save for a house or invest for a house for my child's education. There's different goals that you may have that require investments. There's certain goals you may have that may require savings. So again, 2 different things in my mind. And another way to start for investments is there's a very, very, very powerful book by someone named George S. Clason. And I feel like I always say that name wrong, so forgive me if I did. But it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. If you have not read the book before, read the book. I highly encourage you to read the book. If you have read the book before, give it a little bit of a review. It's a very powerful book. In that book, there are 5 laws. The 5 laws of gold, they're called. The first law is money cometh gladly and in increasing quantity to any man or woman who will put by not less than 1/10 of his earnings to build an estate for his future and that of his family. 10%. Again, this is a law of gold, they call it in the book. There was 5 of them. This is the first one. So, and this is widely talked about, let's say, that 10% in the financial realm, right? Investments. Put away 10%. Because if you take your paycheck, you put away 10%, how quickly, of every dollar you earn, by the way, not just your paycheck, if you get GST, HST returns, put that away, 10% of it. If you get some type of other check or you have a business, 10% of that, right? 10%. Now, doing that over time, how quickly that adds up for you, it's amazing to see, because it just keeps growing. And again, with that compound interest that happens, if you have it in the right investment vehicle, it's another amazing thing. But if 10% is too much for you, you feel, start with that $7 a day. $7 a day, $210 a month, roughly. All right. That is one way to start investing. And again, if you want help with that, you can reach out to me. You can go to your local bank. Let's say you can, look online and start up a Wealthsimple account or some other account. And I'm not trying to promote anybody or anything, and this is not necessarily advice to go and do that, but do your research. That's my disclaimer. Always do your own research. All right. Now, that is it for today. I think we've covered enough. I want to quickly say one more thing. We covered budget creation. We covered the benefits of a budget. We covered some of the common mistakes of a budget. And we, of course, covered one of the biggest things, which is the budget. The budget allows you to alleviate that financial insecurity if you follow it. Putting the plan in place is not everything. Some of us go crazy when we have a plan, like, oh my gosh, yes, I have a plan. I know what I'm going to be doing in 5 years and so on and so forth. Okay, great. But what are you doing in preparation for that plan, that day, that year when it comes? Because if you're not doing if you say, I'm going to run a marathon in 2 years, great. Wonderful. Happy for you. Do you think you can just go out and eat junk and not work out or not run or not stretch or exercise, and then when that 2 years comes, you run the marathon? Why in the world would you want to do that? Work at it every week, every day. Do something that helps you get closer to the physique to be able to run that marathon. Same thing with your budget. That $50,000 in 5 years is not going to come until you save today the dollars you need to save in preparation for that big purchase, let's call it. Because it doesn't have to be a house. It could be something else, let's say, that you wanted. So that's it. Hopefully this was helpful for you, right? So thank you very much for tuning in to today's episode of the Success Spectrum podcast. And hopefully it was enlightening. Hopefully you feel better equipped to tackle the challenges of finances and personal growth, right? And of course, remember this: every step you take is a step towards becoming the next best version of you. Every step you take, every little bit adds up. If you can only save $25 or $50 a month or invest or a paycheck right now, do it. Every little bit adds up. And eventually you'll be in a position where you can put more. Typically what happens is you look back in a couple years or a couple months, whatever, not a couple, but a few months or a couple years, and say, whoa, I saved this much. Let me put more into it, because now I'm really understanding the principle behind this thing and the fact that it does grow. All right. So if you enjoyed today's episode, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a review, and share it with somebody. Share it with a friend, somebody who may be able to benefit from it. If you want more insights and stories, feel free to follow me on my social media platforms down below. And ultimately, join me. All right. Join me, your host, Kadeem McLean, on the next episode, where we are actually going to be talking a little bit more, of course, about some stories and strategies to help you on your journey to become the next best version of you. All right. So until then, keep striving, keep learning, and keep growing. See you then.